Hey everyone, Teresa here. Welcome to my channel, Lost My Thread. Today I'm going to be showing you how to make welt pockets on a pair of trousers. I don't know about you, but welt pockets were one of those things that made me feel a little bit nervous the first time I tried them, and I was pleasantly surprised with how straightforward it was. I actually find them really satisfying to do now, and I do intend to put welt pockets in all kinds of trousers, even when they're not intended to be there, and I'm going to show you how you can do the same. I will be working with the expansion pack from the Chi-Town Chinos by Alina Design Co, but this technique can be used with all kinds of welt pockets, and I would say that you can actually buy just the expansion pack of these trousers if you want to be able to just make welt pockets and put them onto whatever trousers you've already got a pattern for. Before I get right into making the welt pockets, I want to do a little bit of explaining what it's all consisting of so you know what I'm referring to as far as the different pieces. This is a pair of Chi-Town Chinos that I've already made before, so it's the exact same pair of trousers, so it should look very similar on the end with a very similar looking welt pocket. As you can see, there is a dart here, which I have already stitched into the trousers. So this is the back piece, just the same as what this is, but I've done my dart, which is facing the inside, and I've also done my interfacing. I've interfaced this section and traced out the area which is going to be the exact spot for the welt pocket. This piece is my welt pocket bag, so this is going to be visible on the inside of the fabric, and I'll show you on this one. I used proper lining fabric, but this is what it's going to look like on the inside. So this is the bag, so you don't see this bag on the outside at all. It's just going to be a nice pretty detail on the inside. This piece is the welt pocket facing, so that's going to be, if I open this out, this section that you can see, so you will see a little bit of it peeking out when the welt pocket is constructed, but that's this rectangle underneath here. And this piece is the welt pocket rectangle, which is this section that covers over the welt pocket square opening that you're going to cut. I've also gone ahead and prepped my pieces by doing what was asked. So these pieces I have interfaced, I have marked the exact spot where the welt pocket's going to be, and I have also serged the edge of both of these pieces. And for the pocket bag, I've also marked out the rectangle where I want the welt pocket to be. It might not be super visible on camera, but I can tell you in real life, it is very easy to see that, and I don't think I'm going to have any difficulty making sure that I match that up accurately. The next bit that I need to do is I need to take both of these pieces, these are the welt pocket facing pieces, and I need to fold the long edge up by 1/2 inch and iron that in place. Now these sections that you folded in half, you need to attach to the wrong side of just this piece of fabric. You might see that I've already attached this to the trousers, and that is because I failed to do this when I was supposed to do it. So I'm just going to move the rest of the trouser fabric out of the way, and there are some notches on this piece of fabric, and there's also some notches, she says, yeah, there are some notches on here as well. So I'm just going to put this on, making sure to line my notches up, and we are going onto the wrong side of this bag, pocket bag, and we are putting this with the right side up of this. So we're folding the edges under, right sides up, and we're going to pin it in place and stitch along this edge. So for this, I'm going to be using my edge stitch foot, or I think this is technically called the stitch in the ditch foot. So it's a sewing machine foot that has a little ridge that sticks out at the bottom, and that's where you're going to line the fabric up against to make sure that you're keeping a nice even line. So this I'm just going to attach like a normal foot, pulling my threads to the back, and then what I'm going to do is change my needle position. If I were to stitch just as it was in the middle, that would be for stitching in the ditch, so stitching right along a seam line, but I don't want to do that. I want to stitch a little bit to one side. My preference is generally to stitch more to the left. Why? I don't know. I just find that works well for me. So stitch to the right or the left, whatever you're doing, just make sure that you're stitching the direction where your fabric is going to be. So we're just going to go ahead, set this down with my sort of folded over fabric right up against the edge of this little foot, which is going to make sure that it maintains the same distance from the edges I'm stitching. you need to slow down, straighten up, take pauses, definitely do that. And then we're gonna flip it around. Whoops, dropped my scissors, ignore the sound effects. And we are going to stitch on the other side. So there we are. 2 nice, neat rows, if I can show you. 2 nice, neat rows of stitching there. And now we're gonna make a little sandwich. We're gonna start with the pocket bag, right side up, trouser, right side up, and the welt pocket rectangle, wrong side up. So always double check your instructions to make sure you're doing everything in exactly the right sandwich order. But we've got the rectangle for where the welt pocket wants to be on the top of this. It's also on the underside of this, and it's on the underside of this. So what we need to do is make sure that we are lining all of those up accurately. So I tend to just use a pin. I'm going to go into the top or bottom, depending on the direction you're looking at this, the bottom corner here on my left side. And I'm going to poke it through the bottom corner of the left side of the trousers, making sure I'm pushing it all the way through there. And then I want that to be on the bottom left corner here. So definitely try and be as accurate as you can. And then what I will often do is then just do that top corner as well, just because I want to make sure that we're definitely at the right angle. So we're poking into the corner here, and whoops, don't want to lose that pin. I'm going to do this without the pin falling out, so sorry if it's not the most clear on the video. So what I'm going to do in this case now is take a pin through all layers, go through so I know that it's lined up in that spot, so these pins can now come out. I'm going to do the same now on this opposite side. Okay, so theoretically now this should be lined up everywhere, but I'm going to do a few little test points just because sometimes things can shift a little bit and I want to make sure that everything is as flat as it can be. So I'm going to try and just do from the middle and see how that goes. If I just poke a pin through the middle of the bottom, I can look and see, is that the middle of the bottom here? That's actually pretty good. And here it's pretty good as well. I will say that on these 2 layers, perhaps the pin could have shifted up ever so slightly. And on this layer, actually, it could shift down ever so slightly. And when I lay this down now, I can have a really good feel that feels really nice and flat. So I know that if I stitch through following the line that I've got traced here, it's going to go through all of the lines equally accurately. So now we're going to move over to the sewing machine and stitch this in place. One thing I will say is it's really important to make sure that you don't have fabric folding under and tucking in. You want to make sure that you are holding everything nice and flat as a single layer. And we are going to be stitching along the longer lengths of this welt pocket square. You're not going to be doing the little short edges right now. You do that later. So it's really important to make sure that you keep those open. Now, obviously it's super important that you get the exact point on the corner there. So I'm going to start by just lowering my needle down by hand, just to make sure that I've definitely got into the right spot. I can then put my presser foot down. And then you're going to do a few stitches and then back stitch a few stitches to make sure that you're securing at the end there. I'm going to slow my machine right down and I'm going to reduce my stitch length just to make sure that I can be a little bit more accurate. So I've done a few stitches. My machine allows me to keep the needle down, so I would say whenever you're pausing, make sure you do that. I'm going to back stitch now. right to the exact spot where I started, and then I'm just going to try and stitch as accurately as I can. Again, you want to watch where you're going, that you want to stop as close to that corner as possible. You need to pick up the presser foot just to make sure if you're there, and I really am there. So I'm going to now back stitch a few stitches, and it's time for the other side. So there we are, we've stitched all the way along to where those red lines are, but we have not stitched across. And the next thing we need to do is to fold this up on that stitching line and just press along there. So we're going to do that on the bottom edge and then fold it up along the top edge and press as well. We then want to cut along the center between these two stitching lines, but leaving about a ½ inch from each edge so you don't cut all the way across. So the way I find that tends to work best to do this is start by folding it completely in half, and you want to make sure that these stitching lines are lined up as accurately as possible so you can feel that they are in the same point from front to back. Feel free to check with a pin if you're a bit nervous or a bit unsure. And then with some very sharp scissors, I'm just going to cut just a little bit just to be able to get through all layers. And then when I can open it out, I can see that I've managed to cut through all of the layers. And then I'm going to use that as my starting point to go along. But I do want to make sure that I'm stopping at about ½ inch from the end there. I'm then going to cut from the point where I've stopped cutting to the corner there of this line, so where I stopped that stitch, and you want to be as close to that corner as you can, which is going to allow it to be as neat as possible. You do not want to cut the stitch line, but you want to cut as close to the stitch line as you possibly can, and do that from both angles. And then we're going to do the same on this side. So I've gone as close to that corner as I can. And then this piece is going to be pushed through to the back. And as you can see, our stitch line at the top and the bottom, if I can straighten that out, are going to help it to form a really nice, neat rectangle. So the corners of the rectangle, this is the bit where if you cut as close into the corner of that pocket as you can, you're going to have a much neater edge that lies a bit more flat. If you feel like it's a bit bulky, it's not as flat as you like, go ahead and trim a tiny bit more into those corners, but obviously you want to be careful because you don't want to go too far. When you're folding this over as well, you want to try and make sure that you are matching these two edges up. You don't want to have any of that bottom fabric poking through. You want it to be ideally pretty much invisible and with, yeah, as neat of a pocket edge as you can. I'm just going to go ahead, use a little steam, and press. Now if we have this right sides up, so this is the back of your trousers, we're going to flip it over. And we need to close this open section up. So the way you're going to do that is by folding this back up again, so this bit that you've already pressed down, and then you're going to fold it to make sure that it's folded just enough that it's lining up with the top of that cutout section. And that's going to mean that when you flip it over, you will see that that covers up that space really nicely. And you're going to just press that really well into place. And then flip it over just to make sure that it definitely covers the area, which it does. There's not going to be any part of the pocket bag peeking through, so I can see that that looks really nice and neat from this side. When we're back on this side where we can see the outside of the trousers, you want to fold up the edge of the main trouser fabric and the lining, or the pocket bag rather, and you will see this little triangle here. The triangle is actually the section that we cut out. If you remember when we cut along here, we didn't go all the way to the edge. We cut at a 45-degree angle, and that's the little bit that you're seeing. So we've got this little point here, and what you're going to do is stitch down at this edge here. So that's going to be that line that we didn't stitch down initially, and we're also going to be stitching through this section that we've got folded up all the way through to the back of this section here. So that's going to secure everything down and stop it from potentially peeking open or stretching over time. So we're going to secure that, just a little stitch along there, and then on the opposite side, stitching along there, and do that on both legs of the trousers. All right, so now what we're going to do is fold this back like we were showing you on the ironing board. Fold the pocket bag back as well, and we have that little triangle which we're just going to stitch down as accurately as we can, trying to avoid stitching into any of this fabric. So you might prefer to pull those back a little bit, but we just need to try and stitch along that edge of that triangle. I am always going to do a few little back stitches as well. And then everything is all nice and secure through all layers. All right, it's time for the buttonholes now. So I'm going to use my seam gauge to mark where 3/8 of an inch is. And then I've got my little, this is my Choco liner pen. It's just chalk with a little wheel inside. I don't know if you'll be able to see the little wheel, which helps it to form a nice neat line when the chalk comes out. So you just draw along there. And there's chalk powder inside. And you end up with a nice neat line. And this is chalk, so you can just brush it off afterwards. So this is where the buttonhole needs to start, and then it's going to go downward from there. Now again, so important to make sure that everything is lying flat underneath the way you want it to be. So this pocket bag should be lying flat. You've got your little folded up section underneath. You don't want this pocket bag to be folded up here. You want to try your best to have everything all nice and flat so you don't have to undo it. Now this chalk mark is going to be my sort of highest point. The way it's facing me though really is the bottom point of where I want this buttonhole to be. I know my machine, and I know that if I line up the edge of this little square section here of where the needle's basically coming down, that's going to be the bottom edge of my buttonhole. If yours is not, and it's going to start at the opposite end, then you just want to make sure that you're turning this around. But I'm going to line this up. Just need to lift my presser foot because I am going through a lot of layers to make sure that I've got the chalk lined up with the edge here, which I do. I also want to look at the angle because I want to make sure that this is going to be at a right angle to the bottom of my pocket bag here. So I'm actually just using, I've just got a little, this is my hump jumper, my Gina-majig that I'm going to use at other points in this project, but it also creates a nice right angle there so I can make sure that it's all lined up as accurately as possible. And then we're going to go ahead and stitch. Now my hands are here just to make sure that everything's going through as it should. There was a point where I felt like there was a resistance because it was a bulkier bit of fabric, so I just helped to guide the fabric through at that point, but you're not really supposed to be pushing or pulling, obviously. You try and let it do its job. And we've got a buttonhole. Now, it does look like there's a little pucker at the bottom edge of the buttonhole. That's actually the edge of my of my dart there, so that's why it looks like it's slightly creased over. But I'm happy with where that is. I'm happy with how it looks. So I'm going to go and do the other side. When I'm opening up buttonholes, I like to use this product. It's called Fray Check. It's just a little liquid that you put into the area of the buttonhole before you open it, and it stops it from fraying. Doesn't mean it will never fray eventually, but it just delays it and it tends to not fray as much. There we go. All right. You may notice that it discolors the fabric a little bit initially. It's just because it's wet. Basically, when it dries, you won't be able to see, but it looks a little bit darker than it did before. But yeah, you put that on there. I tend to just put it on one side and I'll just leave it there for a little bit to dry, and then I'll go ahead and open these up. The way I open my buttonholes is I've got a buttonhole chisel. Again, I'm making sure that I'm not like folding any fabric up that I'm going to completely accidentally cut into. So this is my buttonhole chisel. You can get different ones. I can't remember. This one doesn't have a brand name listed on it, so I'll try and see who it's from. It might be a Prim one, I'm not entirely sure, but I just got it online. It wasn't anything super fancy. I do keep the cover on there because this thing is seriously sharp. But the idea is that you're going to place your fabric, your buttonhole, down on the cutting mat, and you're going to take this chisel and put it right into the center. Now, if it was a smaller buttonhole, I wouldn't be able to get away with this chisel. If it's bigger, I sometimes have to do a cut in one area and then move it and cut to another area if it's bigger than my chisel, but that works absolutely fine for me. It just avoids the problem of making accidental cuts into your threads, and sometimes if you're using scissors or something, or your seam ripper, you might go a bit beyond where you intend to. So I'm going to lay this down. I'm going to line my chisel up just in between where those kind of edges of the buttonhole are, and then you're just going to push down. I tend to kind of wobble a little bit back and forth, and I can usually feel when it's gone through, but if in doubt, you can kind of pull up the edges and see if the fabric is moving, and it's sort of sliding up my chisel, so I know that it's gone all the way through. So that is my opened buttonhole. Because it's got the fray check, it is quite nice and tidy there. Okay, we are now going to pull this whole pocket bag, all of this, through to the right side. So it's all going to come on through. Making sure that we pull those edges out to this side. Easier said than done when you've done such a great job of pressing everything like I have. As you can see, it's determined to go back onto the other side. And what we need to do now is fold this up, and we're actually going to line up the top edges of just the bag. We're only interested in the bag. We're leaving the trousers for now. This is the pocket bag. Line up this top edge. And then what we're going to do is straighten this out and stitch this all, or sorry, pin rather, this all along this side edge. So you are just grabbing, let me turn this around. You are just grabbing the pocket bag bit. The trousers are out of the way, and you're just going to pin all of that across and then stitch along here to close the whole bag up. So we are just going to put this down, pocket bag side down, and stitch it 1/4 inch of a seam allowance here. So we are then going to trim this seam down. It's currently a 1/4 inch seam. We want it to be 1/8 of an inch. We'll trim that right down. Do the same on the opposite side here of the pocket bag, and then on the other leg as well. All right, so once we've stitched all of this around on this side, we're going to poke it back through to the wrong side of the trousers. So we're back onto the inside of the trousers now. And this is now our pocket bag on the inside. As you can see, it's a little bit all over the place, not very neat. We're gonna go ahead and give this a nice good press. The corners are definitely not very neat at the moment, so I'm gonna use my handy dandy little point turner. One of my favorite tools I use all the time. Just poke those little guys out. And that is now ready to be pressed nice and flat. And then we're gonna go ahead and do another 1/4 inch seam from the edge there, which will enclose these now 1/8 of an inch seam. So it will be French seamed with all of the stitch lines hidden on the inside. All right, we are so close, guys, almost finished. So this has now been really nicely pressed. I'm going to put this up here so that just so that you can see. Can you see it's all really nice and neat all along here now? So we're going to be stitching closed or stitching a 1/4 inch from the pocket bag only. We need to move the other fabric out of the way, but we're just going to stitch a 1/4 edge along here to enclose that raw edge completely. You can pin here if you feel like you need to. I don't feel like I need to because it's pressed and this is not slippery fabric, but you might prefer to do it if you've got really slippery fabric. And we've got our nice, neat 1/4 inch seam all along both edges. And when you look from the inside, you can't see any raw edge. It's all enclosed beautifully. All right, last couple of steps. I swear we are nearly there. So your back pocket, your welt pocket in the back, you are generally going to expect to put your hand into the pocket to go down. You're not going to expect the pocket to also go upward, which currently it does. We can go all the way through the top. So what you're going to do is fold the trouser bit back out of the way and just stitch along the edge of that pocket bag there. This would be a great use for that stitch in the ditch foot. But I tell you, I'm lazy and I don't want to change feet. And also, I don't mind if it's a little bit further over. I'm not digging my hand up to the top of my pocket, but mainly you just want to make sure you're not catching any part of the trouser here. You're going to have a weird little fold. And then when you look from the right side, you can't actually see that stitching because it's all underneath, but now you can no longer poke your finger up into the top of that section of the welt pocket. So all that's left to do, we are so close. We need to install a button, obviously. And then this top of the pocket bag now just needs to be basted into place at the top of the trouser. So that's gonna remain part of the trousers that will be visible from the inside. And then I'm gonna go through, this is the center of where I want the button to be. So I'm gonna go slightly underneath that point, all the way through to the back. And I will go through the front first, where the button's gonna sit, so that way the knot will be hidden by the button itself. And then I'm gonna poke through slightly above where that was. And that's where we're going to then attach the button. And we're good. I'm really sorry, guys. There is one more bit that I think is really important. I will say that it's probably optional, but I don't think you should opt out of this one. And this is to add some bar tacks to either side of your welt pocket here. I think it makes a really nice, neat finish, and it also can cover up a little bit of any wobbly bits that weren't 100% perfect on your edge here. So I definitely am going to want to do that. And as far as the bar tack, you're basically just going to be doing a zigzag stitch, but it's a particular length of zigzag. So I'm going to bring my machine onto my standard zigzag stitch. We've got the width here and we've got the length here. So what is recommended in this pattern, which I think is a really good starting point, is you're going to want your width to be between 2 and 3 centimeters. So at the moment it's at 5. So I'm going to go to the 2. I've got 2, 2.5, and 3 to work with. Your machine might not be digital, so you might just be looking at your approximate range there. And then the length of stitch we want to be between 0.3 and 0.5. So I'm literally going to go from like the bottom of all of it, see what that looks like, and do a little bit of a test and see what I think. So if we start with a 2 width and a 3 length. Have a look and see what we've got. I think that actually looks pretty stinking good. I'm gonna do some more tests to give myself an idea of what I'm comparing to. I might go slightly longer just because that felt like it was really kind of digging into the fabric for ages. Yeah, I feel like that one sits a little bit flatter, so I think I will go with that stitch width. As far as, or stitch length rather, as far as the stitch width, I might just try, again, we're all testing here, slightly wider. And I feel like probably that looks to me more kind of official, like a bar tack should do. So I think I'm gonna go for this. So I've got 2.5 width and 0.4 length. Now, obviously your machine, your fabric might be different. Do not assume, but I think this is a good starting point. So I'm gonna line my presser foot up so that I'm just at the very top. My needle's gonna be going just at the very top, and I'm gonna be stitching nice and straight down this edge. Wish me luck, guys. I think that looks pretty snazzy. I probably could have gone slightly inward. Not enough for me to redo it as far as I'm concerned, but I'll do it on the other side. Yeah, I'm happy with that side. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the other leg. So there we go. 2 welt pockets from the outside and 2 welt pockets from the inside. I love that little color pop. I'm gonna love how that looks on the inside of my trousers. So some of you might be able to spot the fabric that was used in the pocket bag in the shirt that I'm wearing. I felt like I couldn't not do that because I'm a total dork and I think it's really fun. I hope you found that helpful if you are thinking of doing some welt pockets yourself. I will show you the finished article because they are now complete. We fast forward into the future and this is a finished pair of trousers. I will put some pictures up so that you can see what they look like on my body, because I feel like you can understand a little bit more what the pocket looks like when it's where it's meant to be. I think they turned out really cute. I think it all came out really neatly, and if you follow along with my steps and use my tips, you should be able to get a neat finish for yourself. If you enjoyed the tutorial and you found it helpful, please do let me know in the comments down below. Give me a like and consider subscribing if you want to see more tutorials, general sewing videos, and just want to stick around. I hope to see you all again before long. Bye!